Welcome back to Colorful Clipboard. Carrie and I are so glad to have you join us today. We are going to talk about the Tiger Time. Woohoo! Oh, there she. Tiger is with us. So I'm going to have a really hard time trying to remember to not call him Tigger because I'm going to want to go T-I-double-G-double-G. All right.
Well, if you want to call it Tigger Time, I suppose you can. And it's not an idea we came up with. I heard about it from Amy Porterfield, who is, one of my mentors who's never met me. That's what I call people who I read their books and I listen to their podcasts. They're my mentors. They just don't know. And she talked about Tiger Time, and I tried to find a really good definition from her, and I couldn't. She just talks about it from time to time. So here's my definition. There needs to be time in every day and in every week where you have time that cannot be interrupted, and that people should not interrupt you unless they would interrupt a tiger for the thing that they're trying to get you to do. So if they would ask the tiger, can you please go find me some pink construction paper, then they can interrupt you. If not, they don't interrupt. Because we need time to just think, and we need time to do work that needs mental energy. But the other thing is I use it also for letting people know to not come in because I'm having a confidential conversation. So those are the different uses for what I have come to call Tiger Time. I didn't call it Tiger Time, before Amy Porterfield introduced me to the concept, but I always
so we
had
used to, for years when we were doing time management, we would talk to people about putting their rocks on their day. And in my case, a lot of times those were the types of things I put as my rocks. Like, I have to have this time to do this. Depending on the type of person you are, you may not need true Tiger Time to do accounting. You may not need true Tiger Time to send emails to parents or things like that. But I did, because it was one of those things that me personally, when I found myself multitasking those kinds of tasks.
Then we mess up.
Yeah, I was gonna say they weren't done with as enough proofing. So
what exactly each person needs to use their uninterrupted time in their day, the blocks in their day that nobody can interrupt, is going to vary. So
real quick, how much time are we talking, do you think, for an average director? Maybe it's by size of center. If somebody's going to start putting this into their daily schedule, because maybe they haven't, maybe they've just let the monkeys run wild, how would they start? What might be a great place to start?
I would start with 15 minutes. I would start with 15 minutes, especially if you have very needy staff who seem to always be buzzing your office to ask for this thing, that thing, can you help me with this, that, or the other? Start with 15 minutes, but I would like you to have at least an hour every day eventually. So the goal is to have an hour every day, and that you may have some blocks that are longer than that, once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month, because you're doing something like scheduling when all the kids are moving up from one classroom to another, or doing your annual taxes if you're the one who does the taxes, or putting together all of the new student packets for the kids who are coming in, at the beginning of the school year or in January, those two big times that you get a whole bunch of enrollment. You're going to need more than 15 minutes, and you're probably going to need more than an hour to put together all the new student packets, right? And theoretically, yes, you could be interrupted to answer questions about how to fill out a form during that, but they also could wait an hour and 15 minutes because maybe you made it a 2-hour block and you're 45 minutes in and people are like, but I need to know how to fill out my health insurance form. Not right now, you don't. Like, very few things are actually necessary for you to be interrupted right now.
Okay, so a starting director might start with 15 minutes and then maybe move into maybe a longer time or a couple of times during the day, if I heard you right. So how do they tell people their Integra time? Is this like, do they make an announcement? Do they just lock their door? And then you got the toddler banging on the bathroom. Like, how do you communicate this to people?
I mean, different people use different things. I made a door hanger that says, shh, Tiger time, interrupt at your own risk. I printed up a couple of extras. So if somebody wants one, let me know. I can stick it in an envelope and ship it to you. But it was basically, modeled on a door hanger for a hotel, a do not disturb kind of a thing. It's got white and black lines. So it's very distinctive. People can see it from a distance and know, aha, that's what's happening. But before that, I had if my door is closed, do not open it ever. And if you think you need me, knock on the door if the door is closed, because most of the time I kept the door open. And when I had staff say, well, why can't I just open the door? I said, because I might be changing my clothes. I might be talking to someone about a confidential issue, or, I might be dealing with payroll and I don't want you to see anybody else's payroll information. So that was 3 different examples. And the first one made people laugh, that I might be changing clothes, but I'm a director and I get spit up on just like anybody else. And if I get spit up on, I have to change my shirt because I have to be able to look like a director, even if I've also been subbing in a room where somebody threw up on me. So that's one way, is if you have an open door policy, if the door is closed, it's not open. Treat it like a closed door. Some programs, their door is closed all the time, but there's a window into the rest of the center. And so if the blinds are closed is a way to communicate. Basically, you need to use nonverbal communication to let people know this is not a time to be interrupted. But if you haven't done this before, you may have to have some verbal communication with your staff ahead of time and have, like a staff-wide memo that everybody has to sign, or have it at a staff meeting. This is what it means when my door is closed.
So could that be something that people could even add into their employee handbook?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Or they could just make it an SOP.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, so like you started today, but then all of a sudden you bring on new staff over the course of the year. Instead of having to talk about it at every staff meeting, if you have an assistant director who actually maybe handles your orientation or onboarding of new staff, this way it's there. And that could be a way to put in a policy if you are a program that has multiple administrators, because perhaps you aren't the only staff person who might need staff time. If you have a bookkeeper, an accountant, their door may be shut most of the time, because they may not want to have people around when they're handling even parent receipts or whatever, however your organization handles money.
Yeah. And if you find a tiny tiger, you could attach a scrunchie to it, and then you can attach it to the doorknob. And then when somebody tries to open the door, they see the tiger and it reminds them, oh, this must be tiger time. I should maybe not do that.
Is what you do with that one?
Huh?
Is that what you do with that one?
Yeah, we have a lever door, so it doesn't need much room. But you also need to tell people like when can I interrupt you if you're in tiger time? And so my general rule is if you've already called 911.
Okay. Would that be the same thing with a parent or licensing?
Well, licensing can always interrupt me. And so if they get, to see me in my underwear because they opened a door when I was changing clothes, I just got to suck that up. But licensing can always interrupt. But parents, again, they get me at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. I presume that most people understand that if a door is closed, you should knock.
So I was actually thinking if you were a staff person who called licensing or who called parents.
Oh, okay. Yes. I'm sorry. I thought you were.
So yeah.
Okay. Different question. Yes. That's kind of where your criteria is going to vary. But again, if I'm in there for 15 minutes, they can wait 15 minutes to tell me they called a parent to say that a child has a fever. I can wait 15 minutes to get that information. I can wait 15 minutes to be told that we've got an issue where we're going to have to report something to licensing. 15 minutes isn't going to make a difference in that case. I don't think. But I am a big believer in very few things are actually emergencies that my staff sometimes think are emergencies. I don't think it's an emergency when you just had, when a child threw up. That's not an emergency to me. That's working with children.
You mean running out of goldfish at snack time is not an emergency?
Absolutely not. There's lots of things where people feel like they need to tell the person in charge immediately. And so part of what Tiger Time does is helps your staff have more confidence that they can actually handle things. They don't need me to hold their hand through everything. A big part of having time where you're inaccessible is building staff confidence. They can problem solve. If they're out of goldfish at snack time, the director probably does not have boxes of goldfish in the office. So they, the director would have to go talk to whoever is in the kitchen anyway. So wouldn't it be easier to just talk to the person in the kitchen? If you don't have a person in the kitchen and you're a center that just does shelf stable snacks and you're out of goldfish, I hate to tell you, as if I'm talking to a teacher and they're like, well, but I'm out of goldfish and the kids want more goldfish, the answer is, well, then I guess you didn't stock your classroom very well. Have you asked any of the other teachers if they have goldfish? And get them into the problem solving mode. When you have staff who are overly dependent on the administrative staff, it's a problem. It's also a problem when you go the other extreme and you have staff who never bring issues to the administration. We want our people to be in the middle, right? And if you said you had Tiger Time for 7 out of the 8 hours of the day, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about 1 hour a day, and it can be in one hunk, or it could be in 2 with 30 minutes and 30 minutes, or it might even be in 4 with 4 15-minute sections. It's what works for you. If you have a little bit of the ADHD, maybe those 4 15-minute segments is the way that you need to go. Or maybe you need to do that to start getting people used to it.
I love your how you share that this is a way to help build your staff confidence. And I think that that is such a key point, especially as a new director, because again, as a new director, there's going to be that whole trying on period between the staff and the director. In that same sense, when you bring on new staff, especially if they've been in the field before, right, they're trying to figure out their place. And by having an idea of the level of confidence that you want all of your staff to have is a great opportunity for you to start to develop a confidence plan. We just talked about training plans. We've talked about bringing in outside trainers. You know, a confidence plan could even be the way you look at your training plan, because it's more than training. And here's a perfect example of something else you want your staff to have. And we've got a couple other topics coming up in some future episodes about helping your staff develop confidence and other ways to do that. If you have taken our director course, you know we talk a lot about professionalism. And let's be honest, the ultimate component of professionalism is also confidence. And so we really want all that stuff to go together. When we teach our course, there's a reason why it's taught out of a book as a course instead of, you know, a bunch of 10-minute sections, right? Like there's, I don't know, what, 30 chapters in there or something, but they're all little chapters, but they all go together. So as a director, you're going to have staff who you need to bring up. Remember, you're not going to be the director forever, right? You're probably not going to be a director for 28 years. We know that happens. We know there are programs that have had the same director for decades, literally. And then they got to bring somebody new on. And so you may not have that same retirement plan. And Karen and I just were talking about that, you know, a couple of weeks ago, because we are that old. And we like y'all, but and we've been around for 20 years, but I'll be honest, I don't think we're going to see you the next 20. But we have people who we personally have started to think through, who might. So we would, you know, we have people who we would love to be able to see you in 20 years. Chances are we won't be listening to this in this format. Who knows? You might have a pair of glasses on. We could do some whole Jetsons projecting. Yeah, okay. So perhaps maybe I need to turn this back over to Carrie.
No, I mean, I think that is definitely part of it, is that telling your staff that I trust that you can handle most things for 15 minutes or for 30 minutes, especially if they're new staff, like if this is their first job in early childhood, or maybe they've had jobs in early childhood, but now they're the lead teacher and they've been checking in with you and go, okay, can you look over my lesson plan? Because I'm a little concerned that I don't have enough fine motor activities. And then they're calling you to say, hey, can you come spend a little time in the classroom? Because I'm concerned that maybe Josiah has, I don't know, I think maybe he's an FLK. I think he might be a funny looking kid. There might be something going on developmentally. And you're like, yeah, Josiah's parents are mom is out of town for 2 weeks. That's why Josiah is acting a little differently. I completely forgot about that. You're right. You know, if you've got a person who is new into their position or new into the program, who is constantly touching base with you, kind of like a toddler learning to walk, how they walk away from their caregiver and then they scooch back to try to sit back in your lap. You have that with your staff too. Some that are like, I constantly need to be within 3 feet of somebody who can answer a question, or I need to be within, you know, I need to talk to somebody who's been around longer every 15 minutes, letting them know that you have the confidence that they can handle it while you're handling payroll, and that you'll check in with them after you're done with payroll, or, you know, whatever the thing is that you're needing the Tiger Time for. But the other part of Tiger Time that we haven't really talked about very much is something that is very much a you kind of a thing, Kate, which is the taking time in your schedule to do future pacing and future planning, and, you know, just taking time to be in the quiet. You're much better at being in quiet than I am.
So when we talk about being in quiet, we're not talking about being on Facebook. We're not talking about being an email. We're not talking about picking a good book, or, you know, I'm not going to say we're not talking about taking a nap, because there are going to be times when perhaps maybe that's exactly what you need. And maybe you need 3 little tigers out there all at once, because you're like, yeah, it's one of those days. I just need 3 tigers. But you definitely need to make sure that you give yourself those larger blocks of time once every couple of weeks, once a month, annually and quarterly. So when we start talking about those kinds of tiger times, again, those are things that you're probably going to discuss with your staff and look at the flow of how weeks generally go. We all know that there are days of the weeks where you would never, ever, ever try to schedule a 3 or 4 hour block of tiger time. And times of the year, right? Like never on a Monday, never on a Friday.
Never in August.
Probably not in at least early December. And, there's definitely some days in the spring and in June, right? So pay attention to holidays, know when when everything is happening, but it's also great to get it on the schedule. Now, there's a couple of ways to do these bigger blocks of tiger time as well. You can also combine them with staff work time. Maybe your staff are working in their classrooms. If they're working in their classrooms and they're going to be there for 6 hours, my suggestion, first of all, would be like, you maybe not try to do 4 hours at once if you've never been a 4 hour at once kind of person. So if your staff are there for 6 to 8 hours, getting their classrooms ready, then let them all know, give them their own version of Post-it notes and clipboards and things that they can make lists and notes on. And give yourself a mailbox, give them an opportunity to give you the information. It doesn't, and you're in the building. But this keeps you accountable to yourself, because there are some of us out there, and I definitely have had my times with this where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I get in and I start to get distracted. And it's not really ADD and it's not really squirreling. It's that whole, oh, I want to go clean this up. Oh, I see some dust, right? So it's more stall tactics because you might not really be ready. So there is that time where you've given yourself a block of time and your head's not there. So give yourself that break and know, it's okay to go dust that shelf if you need to. There are some of us, and I am definitely one of those people, that I will give myself a 2 to 3 hour block for something. And it may take me 2 hours to figure out what I'm going to write. Then I sit down and I get it done in 30 minutes. Now, it still took me 3 hours to do it, but that's just how my brain works, because I also know people who take notes, who write drafts again, who write drafts a fourth time, who just brainstorm.
I think anybody who reads our newsletter is aware that we do not do multiple drafts a lot of times. We will have the wrong word in something in our newsletter. I will have put too many O's in the word to, or used, some other thing oddly. You did the same thing. So I've had at least one newsletter that I can remember in the past 6 months that went out with one of those insert whatever here still in the template that I sent out.
I think the whole year you had like some address in the middle of nowhere, like it was like Anywhere USA or something at the bottom of the newsletter template.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so just because it's a 2 hour block doesn't mean necessarily that the thing itself takes 2 hours, but it's going to take 2 hours to get yourself into the groove to do that. And sometimes that's calling parents to do an exit interview. The actual phone call of the exit interview is going to take you maybe 10, 15 minutes, but you're going to block 45 because you have to get in the right mental headspace to talk to a parent who has left your center, because you need to get the information from them about what they liked about what your center and what they didn't like. Because if you don't have the information, you can't make it better. And you can't give the teacher the reassurance that it wasn't about you. It was that they changed jobs and now, the place where they're working has an on-site childcare center.
Or it's the other direction, or yeah,
all those kinds of things. So doing the exit interview is never high on your priority list, right? Except that you need the information. And so we've talked mostly about tiger time that's just you in the room, but we've also got the tiger time when there's someone else in the room, because the assistant director and the director are planning the big spring festival. That's tiger time too. It's just not solo tiger time. That's still tiger time. that cannot be interrupted. You are trying to create this big fundraising event. If the staff would like new nap mats, they need to leave you alone. Or whatever it is, right?
Right. And we talked briefly about calling parents, but then there is parents coming in. And, although we would love to think that we've always planned out Tiger Time and that Tiger Time is when it's convenient to us, there are definitely going to be times in your program when this is an emergency Tiger Time and you're just putting the door, the tiger on the door or whatever, because there are going to be situations, whether we like it or not, with both parents and staff that require immediate intervention. Or maybe it's a parent you haven't seen face to face in weeks, and maybe they're 3 weeks behind and it wasn't a conversation, you couldn't get them on the phone. All of a sudden they show up. Well, guess what? That's Tiger Time. They're coming and having a chat with you in the office.
You need to find out, why has the credit card failed?
Yeah.
And, did they know the credit card failed? Because sometimes I am definitely a person who has had credit cards expire, and I was unaware that that was one of the things in my mail that I haven't dealt with this week. Because it just looks like junk mail.
And I'm one of those people who leave multiple voicemails to be heard. So I'm going to bring that back to something that I know we've talked about before. Whenever you're communicating with parents, staff, vendors, whatever, make sure you try to communicate with them in multiple ways. Don't assume that everybody reads their email. Don't assume everybody opens their mail, and don't assume everybody is going to, check a text. So make sure you've communicated with them multiple ways. If you're not really sure why you're not hearing back, make sure you've tried all three and at different times of the day. Otherwise, maybe you need to perhaps let them something certified. I mean, there's other things. So if you have an instance and you're not really sure, give us a call, ask us, email Kate or Carrie at texasdirector.org. We'd love to help you brainstorm it. We'd love to share it on a future podcast if you were okay with that. As you can tell, like most of the topics that we talk about, Carrie and I could sit here all day. But right now, I kind of feel like we've got to figure out how to keep this tiger in the zoo. Because we are really trying to pet it, and it is definitely a wild animal at the moment. So we are going to try to put it in a cage and hopefully keep it somewhat contained. And hopefully you guys got a little bit out of today's episode, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Look for new changes about the podcast in a future episode. Kate and I are busily working behind the scenes, and you never know what's going to happen next.
Welcome back to Colorful Clipboard. Carrie and I are so glad to have you join us. We are going to start to explore some different ways over the next several weeks, not necessarily every week in a row, because we want you to have some other information as well, but ways that you can build the confidence in not only yourself, but also your staff and in your program. And so a couple episodes ago, we did talk about how even Tiger Time can help build the confidence of your staff. So today we're going to talk about how you can help build the confidence of your staff by doing observation, as well as what does it mean to have a consultant, or how can somebody else do observation on your program? So with that, Carrie, pick a side, and I'm going to let you get us started.
I guess I was going to talk a little bit about how programs have used us as consultants.
Okay.
At doing observations at the school. I do a fair amount of them for people who are opening a school, and they're like, come and look at the space, look at how we have the classrooms set up. This classroom is having a little bit of a difficulty with this behavior problem. And frequently I can go, yeah, that's because you need to move these two pieces of furniture. So it's why you need somebody to come in and do observation, whether it's the director or a teacher from another class or an outsider like Kate and I, is because you need fresh eyes on a problem. To me, that's what observation is there for, is to give you fresh eyes on a problem. A child is having a behavior problem, or maybe a whole class is having a behavior problem, or you don't seem to be able to get any enrollment into this classroom.
Okay, so would we only ever use observation for problems?
No, but it's when people think of bringing somebody in from the outside. So inside the school, you also use it. It is recommended, it is best practices to at least once a quarter, so once every 3 months, for the teacher to be doing observation and assessment of the individual children in the classroom. So the teacher is maybe one day looking and seeing what is the general flow of the classroom. Is the flow working? Do I need to change some things? I seem to have 12 children all trying to be in the block center at the same time. Maybe we need a secondary building center, or maybe I need to make the space smaller. There's a couple different options. So that's usually the first day of observation for the teacher. It's basically, you're still doing your normal job. You just have a notepad and you're thinking about it. You're thinking about, what am I seeing? And trying to look at it from a big picture. You're trying to look at the forest, not the trees. Most days the teacher is looking at the trees. Like, these are all the kids and this is what the kids are doing. So the first day it's what's going on with the forest. And then the second day is there anything that's popping up with those individual trees where either they're not being challenged enough in an area, they're not developing, they haven't moved forward in an area of development, or they're having a conflict, something like that. So the second day is usually looking to see, are all the kids where they need to be developmentally?
Okay. So I know this director who used to keep Post-it notes in their jacket pocket. And so that when they were going around and observing during the course of the day, they'd make notes.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And
I've
they would
never
write
heard
those
of that,
notes
ever.
and they'd put them in the other pocket of their jacket. So remember that as a director, you also are doing moment by moment observations. So as a director, you are constantly observing your staff, their flow in their classroom, their communication with their peers in their classroom, and their communication and discipline, and all of those lovely components that go into a classroom day in their interactions with their children. You might also be making it with their interactions with parents. So again, as a director, you're going to use the tool of observation all day long, every day. And the more of those happy Post-it notes that you can make about every staff person that you can give them over the course of the day, at the end of a week, however you want to share that information, that'll go a long way. So although we often think of observation for, we have an issue with a child, whether it's behavioral or
Developmental.
A lot of times we think about it as observation because we keep getting cited for the same thing. Like, there's just something that our program just can't seem to get past related to inspections and regulation. So absolutely, those things are instinctively what people think about. So I'm hoping that you guys also all think about those smiley things, those things that our staff are doing really, really well. So
Yeah,
if you ever choose to bring outsiders to look into your program, whether it is somebody like, maybe you're in a nonprofit and it's just somebody on the board who wants to come observe, or you're actually going to invest in your program and bring in some outside folks, definitely think about whether or not that's one person, whether that's two people, whether that's just negatives, just positives, 1 day or 2 day, or longer, because again, depending on the size of your program. And don't ever hire somebody that says, oh yeah, I can do that, or it's not going to cost you much, because that's probably not what you want. I mean, I'll be honest, you get what you pay for, and you want somebody who's going to take the time to really spend time in your classroom, who's going to ask questions and observe, and then give you a resource that includes a game plan, that includes action items. Just getting somebody's feedback of, oh, you guys have got this down. Oh, you guys are doing good. Yeah, no, that's not useful. That's
not helpful.
That's not useful to your management. Not useful to anybody.
Yeah. So circling back to the director walking around and doing observation, which yes, Kate is 100% right. You should be doing it all the time. Wearing a jacket, having the left-hand pocket for unused Post-it and the right-hand pocket for used Post-its is definitely a page out of my book. But the other thing to think about with that is what we're doing is we're getting prepared for being able to do their annual assessment or their quarterly assessment. If you only pay attention to them the week that the assessment is due, you're not doing them any good. You're not doing your center as much good. And part of what we're trying to do here is build your staff's confidence with observation. So we were talking earlier about building their confidence that they can take a step back and look at their classroom and see what's working and what's not. So they have a little bit of confidence that they can think critically about their own class. But then also what Kate was saying about when you see them doing an amazing job facilitating an art project and helping the kids take it to the next level and take it to the next level, write that down, put one copy of the Post-it note in their file, their confidential file for their review, and give the other half, the other copy of it to them as a note on some note cards that you've made from the children's art that you've cut up into 4x6 squares. Kate and I believe very strongly in reusing the children's art. They only usually use one side of the paper, cut it up, make it into note cards, and use that to give your teachers happy grams. And sometimes the happy grams are about, I saw you working with this child and you guys were having a little bit of a difficulty communicating effectively. I really like how you persisted through that and tried several different techniques. So giving them a happy gram about something that they struggled with, but they were able to resolve, is some of the best confidence boosting you can ever do. And be aware that not everybody wants written words. Some people need to hear them. And some people need to overhear you talking about them to someone else, because they won't believe it if you say it to their face, but they will believe it if they hear you telling Loretta about it.
Well, and definitely don't discount the note card or the Post-it note, even if it's a fairly informal, because I actually have a stack that I have kept over the years. I have some that are in my, even on the desktop of my laptop, because they've come in as emails or social media posts or something. And, you know, it doesn't take much. We are in an age of technology. So again, if you're seeing things that are happening in a classroom and you love the feeling that that gives you just by looking at, you know, snap a quick pic. You know, it's always better if the kid's face isn't exactly in it and it's maybe definitely more the teacher. But even if it's just for you to grab the moment, maybe you don't share the picture, but it's for you to kind of help remember everything about that moment, because we all know there are days where we are running around and we see something out of the corner of our eye that kind of just reminds us why we do this. And, you know, grab a quick pic. Again, those pics, sometimes they're just for you, right? Like how great would it be if you had a book of why I do this job? And you have the pictures, the stories, the thank yous, even if nobody ever sees it but you, and you get an opportunity in your Tiger Time, especially those longer Tiger Time blocks when you're trying to figure out how to get yourself motivated to do the next 4 months of curriculum. This is why you do it, right? So grab those opportunities. In that same sense, because we do have technology, even if you're not sending those pics, take the time to go send a whole bunch of text messages at the end of the day. You know, please don't do it when they're supposed to be paying attention to the children. We already have teachers all over the globe that have a problem with that thing being, literally physically attached to their body. And so if we give them one more excuse to look at it while they're in a classroom, we're not helping the situation. But that doesn't mean that it's 7:30 at night, or maybe it's 7 o'clock the next morning. Maybe you're one of the first, maybe you're part of the opening team and you send all the notes from yesterday, or maybe you do it at the end of the day when you're closing, because you could tell there were some people that were like, and you're thinking, oh, I really want them to come back tomorrow. I need to know that they handled that well, right? So take that time. And we don't always have the time. And I know we've all had those situations where we've probably said something in a situation that maybe was not the best location to have that conversation. Or maybe it was awkward, because again, if you've got staff who don't take compliments well, woo, please do not compliment them in front of other teachers or parents. They're gonna be like, no.
Well, but there's also times that we, as the directors, have said something in the heat of the moment. We're like, what the heck were you thinking? And then we realize, oh, I said that out loud and in a room with other adults. And so sometimes the observation is you observing yourself and going, I owe that person an apology. And I am definitely a person who has written the apology note and bought flowers for a teacher and given them the apology note and the flowers. Kind of like I'm dating them. It's amazing what that does for their confidence and for their respect for you as a leader. If you apologize heartfelt and in a physical way for what you did wrong without saying, but, there's no buts in apologies. Nuh-uh. If you're not sure how to apologize, talk to a rabbi. They do it every Yom Kippur. They help their whole congregation with apologies.
Even if
they
that
have
is
a
not your
specific
faith.
holiday for this. They have a holiday for apologizing.
So that's a great point.
Great resource.
So that's a great point. Just real quick, there's also the 5 love languages of apologies. If that's kind of down if you're a self-help book kind of person. But Carrie brought up a really great point, and I just want to touch on it because it's been a little overwhelmingly in my life for the last 16 months. But definitely understand you and your staff will have things happen in your life that have absolutely nothing to do with what's happening in your program. Not everybody is going to be an open book, and not everybody's going to tell everybody about what's going on in their outside of school life. So giving that grace, understanding that perhaps, especially if you think it's out of character, if you've had a staff person who's been with you for a long time and they do something that you're thinking, that is so not that person, stepping back, giving yourself, some time to reflect. I personally, a couple of days ago, I had a conversation with somebody and I literally screamed because I kept being talked over. Definitely not the grown-up way to handle that. Now the conversation continued to go sideways, so it's not like that got both sides redirected, but just remember that sometimes you personally are having a bad day. Sometimes that teacher's having a bad day. Somebody could have coughed up on them, thrown up on them, bodily fluid on them, and then they had all this stuff happening at home and they've got their own kids and their own stuff. So always try, work extra hard, especially as a director. And depending on your age, we have directors as young as 21. And so depending on your age, especially if this is not something that you grew up doing as far as the whole apology thing, work really hard to anything that seems remotely negative, or even if it's meant to be positive and you have a tendency to make things, maybe not sound positive, but that's how you meant them. Make sure that you try to do some of that stuff in private. So, go ahead and use some maybe Tigger time instead of Tiger time, where the door is shut. You're not going to totally lose it if somebody walks in, but you're trying to give the staff person an opportunity, especially if they seem to have overreacted to, spilt milk, right? Like we've all heard those stories, right? Why are you crying over spilt milk? Well, may not be the spilt milk that they're actually crying over.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And that's part of observation, is watching your staff and seeing what's going on that's not their norm. And if you're doing a good job of observing, then you're going to see those kinds of things. If you're having a problem with getting enrollment into your center, then your observations are probably not cutting it, and you need to bring somebody else in to do the observations, and have somebody else, if you're not being able to convert people on a tour. So maybe it's that your tour language has gotten messed up. So maybe it's that you're just no longer confident when you're doing a tour. And so people are feeling that, and they're not enrolling because you're no longer confident in the tour. It may be that you've seen the same walls every day for 10 years, and you don't realize that they need to be painted. Maybe, again, same thing. Maybe you don't see that the dynamic has shifted in a classroom and you need someone else to come in. It can be somebody who's paid, or it can be your most nitpicky friend. You know, going and getting somebody else to take a look at what's happening at your program can be helpful if you're stuck in a rut or if you're in a downward cycle.
And I'm just going to wrap us up with this one little comment on that. If you do ever choose to use outsiders, consultants in this fashion, set some real clear boundaries. Make sure you're really clear what you're wanting and expecting. Don't make the assumption. Well, like I said before, and I've said it a lot of times over the course of the last couple of years, you do get what you pay for. So just remember that. If I was going to give you advice, if you were one of our clients and you called and said, okay, yeah, I want somebody to come out and do this, I'm going to tell you two things. One, two people. Always, whenever, try to get, if you can get a consultant firm that can bring two people, that's always going to be to your advantage for the exact same reason we've just talked about, right? And then make sure that you are prepared to be a literal open book, especially if you're asking them to help you with anything that has to do with business development, business management, any of that. So hiding or not being honest is not going to help. And they should give you things that they're going to want information before, and they should be prepared to give you a written write-up with a true game plan. So those are things you should expect from them. You should know that they should be asking you for homework ahead of time. If they just show up and they're going to give you 4 hours, and then they're just going to tell you what they think, your best friend can do that for you.
Yeah, it's much more like a CDA assessment, right? You've prepared documents ahead of time. They look at the documents, they observe what's happening at the program, then you meet at the end and they give you time to reflect and to tell what they saw. So it's very much like the CDA EDS visit. As you were saying that, I was like, it is so much like when I do a CDA evaluation visit.
Yeah.
That is what it should be.
Yeah. If somebody's come out and done a credentialing visit, whether it's on your location or on staff, you should expect nothing less from a consultant who's looking at your entire program. I would personally expect more. And so that's why I said, and I've seen programs that have only used one person, and people are fine with that, but there are reasons, and I'm not going to share it necessarily here. But I definitely feel like there's a real advantage to using two people. Even if two people are literally looking at the same stuff, just at different times on different days, because if they're there for 2 days and consultant A and consultant B are flip-flopping what they're looking at, they also are bringing different experiences in, and they're going to be able to give you, in my opinion, a more complete assessment, because you are asking for a program-wide generally. This is not, you're coming to look at a classroom. So if you have a classroom with some behavior issues and you're bringing a consultant in, yeah, one consultant for a few hours is going to be fine. But if you're asking for somebody to come in and really help you market your program, turn over your program, breathe life back in, It's time for an investment, and that observation is going to be really important to you. Even if you think your program's good, but you want it to be great, and you want to figure out how do you get it from good to great, it may take an outsider's perspective to look at you and go, okay, so you're going to need to go get some teachers with actual master's degrees. It's awesome that every teacher you have here has a CDA, but in the credentialing program that you're in, you're never going to go from good to great, even though your teachers are awesome, because the credentialing program you're in is looking for this one piece of magic paper. And so you're going to be.
Yeah, that absolutely could be it. I mean, again, this is just taking that observation tool up to the next notch. Kate and I love doing it. But there's other people who do it too. We're not saying you have to use us. But if you're trying to get your program to be the best program in the area, or you're experiencing challenges, observation has to be part of it. Whether you're at the point where you can do it with internal people or you need to bring somebody else in, that's going to be a judgment call for you and your team. But every director is doing observation on a daily basis, and you might as well get credit for it by giving people those happy notes when you catch them doing the right thing. You want to catch people in their positive actions about 5 times more than you catch them in the negative. If you catch them every day doing something wrong, that means you have to catch them 5 times that day doing something good, because we want them to be motivated and engaged and committed to your center.
Absolutely. Got to love caught in the act. So thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to talking to y'all next week. If you've liked what you've heard, feel free to share. Feel free to leave us a review. Maybe not right now. You can go ahead and write it, but we might ask you to put it on the upcoming announcements that you guys are going to be hopefully as excited about it as we are coming up before the end of the year. There we go. That's how committal I'm going to be. So before the end of 2022.
Okay. Have a great week.